So in my preaching this summer, I've chosen to be inspired by various internet shortcuts. Little shortcuts that people use in messaging and texting and talking to one another. And in particular, in the short forms that have developed in these services, where the limitations on what people can write are very strict. See, when you're sending a text message or when you send a tweet to someone, you have to limit your message to 140 characters or less. And this has led to the development of all kinds of ways to say a great deal with just a few letters. So I started a couple of weeks ago with LOL, which stands for laugh out loud. Last week, I turned to OMG, which stands for oh my God. Today, I'd like to turn to BFF. Now, as we've already established, BFF stands for Best Friends Forever. And I just wanted you to think for a moment about what that means. That out of all of these conversations on the internet that go on day by day by day, one of the phrases that kept coming up again and again was this one. So common that people needed a shortcut to say it. Now, part of that's not very surprising. I mean, I quite understand that people are going to be wanting to talk about friendship a great deal. That there would even be a desire for people to identify someone as their best friend. But why does the second half have to be there? Why do we have to be so specific about it being forever? What is the significance of that? Well, the use of that phrase really comes out of the society and the world of young adolescents. Basically, when young people hit about grade 7, 8, into the early high school years, they are dealing with this huge pile of social anxieties. Do you remember those years? Because I certainly do. And when I hit what was called junior high in North York at the time, I was just a bundle of fears. And as I went to that school, I was afraid. Number one, that no one would like me, that I was not good enough, that I was not smart enough, that I did not dress right, that I was not athletic enough, that no one would ever talk to me. I was afraid that in a school full of kids, I was going to be all alone. And I'll tell you, nothing scared me more at that time in my life than a cafeteria full of kids and nobody to sit with. I was a mess. And at the time, I thought I was the only one. Turns out I wasn't. Turns out that just about every kid around that age is dealing with those kinds of social anxieties. And yes, the particular mix of anxieties may vary from person to person. The way they deal with those anxieties does change. But all of them, whether they be the jocks, whether they be the cool kids, whether they be the schoolyard bullies or the mean girls or the geeks or whoever they are dealing in their own way with those kinds of anxieties. And in fact, the honesty is that even after we graduate high school, many of us still carry those kinds of anxieties with us. It's just that by then, we have learned how to hide them. We have learned how to mask them. Sometimes we've even learned how to hide them from ourselves. But back then, junior high, high school, we don't know how to do that. And we kind of have to deal with them all out in the open, and the emotions are very real and very raw. And as I say, one of the greatest anxieties that kids struggle with at that time is that sense of loneliness, that sense of isolation. And so that is why it is out of that very group of people that this phrase, best friends forever, comes. Because the idea is, at that point in your life, is that if only you could find such a person, if you could only find that person who would be there forever for you, it will solve everything. I mean, I know that at that time in my life, I would have loved to have that kind of person. That BFF, we didn't use the phrase, of course. That's what I desired. Someone who'd always talk to me. Someone who would always sit with me for lunch. Someone who would always pick me to be on their team, even if I wasn't very good at sports. In my mind, that would have fixed everything in my life. I mean, it probably wouldn't have, but that's how it felt. That's how it all felt. Of course, that forever part doesn't usually work out. Not many high school friendships really do last forever. And as much as people intend to always be there for each other, always take time for each other, we all know what happens. Life comes along. People go to different colleges, different universities. People take up careers that lead them in different directions. People fall in love and get married. The relationships don't last forever. Even though at the time they feel like they can and should. So maybe young adolescents do have a thing or two to learn about friendship. Maybe we do too. The Bible has a great deal to say on the subject of friendship. One of the very first things that the Bible ever says about human beings has to do with friendship. In the second chapter of Genesis, God looks at the first human being and says, "It is not good that the man should be alone." And for me, that has always meant that we are designed as human beings for friendship, for companionship, that we are not complete without it. And in the context in Genesis, I do understand that that's really talking about applying to the relationship between a man and a woman in marriage, but it applies much wider than that. To any relationship of mutual support and help. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it says this about friendship: two is simply better than one. For when there are two, they can prosper from their work. When there are two and one falls, there's always someone to pick them up. But woe to the one who is alone and falls, and has no help. We need one another. But as I look deeper into the Bible and what it has to say about friendship, I am struck that far more than talking about what we get from friends and what we need from friends, it focuses in on what we give to our friends. And that is the defining feature of it. In many ways, the bar for friendship in the Bible is set by none other than Jesus Christ himself, who is speaking to his disciples and says this: "Greater love has no one than this, that one should lay down his life for his friends." And if anybody knows anything about laying down their life for someone else, it is Jesus. And when he says that's what the fundamental nature of great friendship is, you know that it's more than just, taking a call from your friend after midnight or giving them the last out of the dozen of the donuts. It's about going all the way. By far the most famous friendship in the Bible is the friendship between David and Jonathan. And theirs was truly a friendship that I would call a best friendship forever. For it was a friendship and a relationship that transcended time and transcended situation, that prospered through the ups and downs of life. That friendship began when things were good. When David joined the army of Jonathan's father, King Saul, and they fought together as comrades. and being comrades in war, being together heroes of the people of Israel. It is, of course, understandable that they should have formed a relationship with each other. But very clearly, right from the beginning, the book of Samuel says it was about more than what they could get out of each other. The book of Samuel puts it this way. Jonathan loved David as his own soul. So Jonathan's focus was not on what he could get out of David. Jonathan wasn't just looking for someone to walk beside him on the long marches, to sit beside him in the mess, to pick him to go out on patrols together. It wasn't what he got out of it. It was what Jonathan put into it. And what he put into it above all was a way of seeing David. For Jonathan chose to see David as someone who was worth something, who was worth as much as his own soul. Now, why did Jonathan choose to see David in this way? Was it because David always did the right thing? That he never failed in any way with his friendship with Jonathan? No, I don't think so. I mean, anyone who's ever read the Bible knows that David was a deeply flawed character. I am sure that he let Jonathan down many a time. How could he not? And yet Jonathan chose to see him in a certain light, to see the value that was in him, to see the value that maybe others could not detect. And that's what made their friendship different. That's what brought it through the good times and the bad. And they had bad times. At some point, King Saul began to see David as a threat to his rule. His popularity would threaten his son Jonathan's future as well. And so it took a great deal for Jonathan to maintain his friendship with David despite those stresses and strains. And ultimately, it took a lot for Jonathan to maintain David's life. And in the end, when Jonathan and his father Saul were killed in battle against the Philistines, it fell to David to make his friendship with Jonathan an immortal thing in poetry. Theirs was indeed a friendship that transcended time and place, and that lives forever. But I think they lived out really the same kind of thing that Jesus was talking about. Jesus talked about laying down one's life for your friend. But not many people are called to go as far with that as Jesus did. But we are all called to go as far with it as Jonathan did. And choose to love another with devotion and see in them the value that is not always apparent on the surface. It is the same kind of friendship. And a better understanding, I think, of best friendship forever than what you have when you get into middle school. I mean, when I was in junior high, what I was looking for was someone who would give me, through their friendship, a certain place, a certain sense of self-worth, a certain sense of belonging. That I would get that from them, from their friendship. But as I've grown and I've matured, I've discovered that the friendships that matter to me, the relationships that matter to me, are the ones where I've learned to go beyond that and see and focus not on what I get out of the relationship, but on what I put into it. And here is the amazing thing. The more you learn to do that, the more you discover that the relationships you have are fulfilling and valuing and building yourself up. That's what David and Jonathan understood. That's certainly what Jesus understood. It's as you give that you receive far more. When you're junior high, the focus is on finding, getting that self-worth, that value from others. the husband I need to be. I often fail, I often fall short. But as I've striven towards that goal, I have found much blessing, and I am very thankful for it. But one thing I'm finding is this, that in this modern social media world that we find ourselves in many ways it seems like we're being pushed back. Being pushed back to that junior high mindset. I mean, what's Facebook? But a way to collect your friends, to list out your friends, to know how many friends you have. And on Facebook, it's not even how well you know those people. I mean, chances are you only know half of the people. You've only actually met half of the people. Or you can at least picture the faces of half the people on your list of friends. And so it's all about quantity, not really about quality. But you got to keep score. That seems to be the idea. In other social media environments, it's the same thing. On Twitter, it's about how many people follow you. On Reddit, it's about your karma. And how do you get your karma? By having other people like what you post or like what you comment. That word like is a key in all of this. And it pushes us back to that junior high school mentality that it's about being popular, getting all of those likes, being one of the cool kids. We're called to be better than that. We're called to be more than that. It's not about having friends, it's about being a friend. The bar was set by Jesus, who knew what sacrificial friendship was all about. The model was given, I think, by David and Jonathan and by others, but it's up to you to be the friend that God is calling you to be in all your relationships. In that, you will find true fulfillment and true value in the name of Jesus Christ. Let's take a few moments in silence.